I never imagined that the sound of a crystal vase shattering against the wall would be the sound of my freedom, but life has these cruel ironies. While the shards shined on the living room floor like broken diamonds, I realized that noise was, in fact, the end of a silent nightmare and the beginning of a love I did not even know I deserved. If you like stories about fresh starts, courage, and love that blooms in the most unlikely places, subscribe right now to the Forbidden Romances channel, because what I am about to tell you changed my life forever. My name is Claire. I am 23 years old, and until recently, I was just the decorative wife of one of the wealthiest men in Bellevue. My routine that day started exactly like all the others, marked by the freezing silence of our mansion in the upscale neighborhood. It was 6 a.m. when the alarm went off, but I was already awake, staring at the lowered drywall ceiling of our bedroom. Beside me, Richard slept heavily, turned to the other side, taking up most of the king-size bed. I got up carefully not to wake him, feeling the heated floor beneath my bare feet, a luxury that, honestly, never managed to warm the cold I felt inside. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and stared at my reflection. A pale redhead with soft dark circles and an expression of someone crying for help without opening her mouth. I walked down the floating white marble stairs, hearing only the echo of my own footsteps. The house was beautiful, worthy of an architectural magazine cover, with glass walls showing the impeccable garden outside. But it was a lifeless house. No smell of a baking cake, no laughter, no mess. It was a museum where I was the curator and the main exhibit. I prepared Richard's breakfast, scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast, and black coffee with no sugar, exactly as he demanded. I placed everything on the 12-seat dining table, sat at the opposite end, and waited. He came down at exactly 7 o'clock, already dressed in an impeccable Italian suit and smelling of his expensive woody cologne, which I once found seductive, but now made me nauseous. "Good morning, honey," I said, trying to put some warmth into my voice. He did not even look up from his cell phone as he sat down. "Is the coffee hot?" was the only thing he asked, bringing the cup to his lips. "I just made it," I replied, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest, the feeling of being invisible inside my own home. Richard was a handsome man, I could not deny it. Silver hair at the temples, the posture of someone who rules the world, the smile of someone who closes million-dollar deals. When we got married 3 years ago, I, an architecture student full of dreams, was dazzled. He promised I would be his queen. But queens can also be prisoners in their castles. "I will be home late today. I have a dinner with investors," he said, wiping his mouth with the linen napkin and standing up. "Can I go with you?" I asked, on an impulse to try and recover the connection we had in the beginning. He stopped, looked me up and down with a condescending smile, and let out a short laugh. "Claire, it is a business dinner. Serious matters. You would be bored and... well, you wouldn't have much to add to the conversation, would you? Enjoy your day at the flower shop. It is more your style." Those words hurt more than a slap. He kissed my forehead distractedly and left, leaving behind only the trail of his cologne and the emptiness. I took a deep breath so I would not cry. I needed to get out of there. My job at the flower shop, although he despised it and called it a hobby, was the only thing keeping me sane. There, I dealt with colors, with life, with people who genuinely smiled when they received a bouquet. I grabbed my purse and went to the garage, determined to have a good day despite everything. When the automatic garage door slowly began to open, I saw that the weather outside was gloomy, typical of Seattle. A fine, freezing drizzle was falling, perfectly matching my state of mind. It was then that I noticed the moving truck parked at the house next door. The neighboring house had been empty for months, and I always looked at it wondering who would have the courage to live in that old exposed brick townhouse, so different from the modern mansions on our street. I stopped my car at the driveway exit, waiting for the truck to maneuver, and that was when I saw her for the first time. She stepped out of the passenger side of a black Jeep, slamming the door firmly. She was a tall, blonde woman, her hair tied in a practical ponytail. She wore dark jeans, heavy boots, and a black leather jacket that seemed to have a lot of history. She did not look like the other women in the neighborhood, who lived in salons and shopping malls. She had an alert posture, as if she were ready for anything. Our eyes met through the glass of my car. She had intense, penetrating brown eyes. She did not look away, just nodded in a brief, serious greeting. I felt a strange shiver run down my spine. Something that was not fear, but rather a magnetic curiosity. Who was that woman who seemed to carry a storm inside her, and at the same time conveyed an unshakable security? I accelerated the car and went to work, but the image of the new neighbor did not leave my head all day. I did not know it yet, but that quick exchange of glances in the rain was the first thread of a web that destiny was beginning to weave. While I arranged roses and lilies at the shop, my mind kept returning to her strong figure, so contrasting with my fragility. I returned home in the late afternoon, bringing with me an arrangement of white orchids we had not sold. The house was silent again. Sarah, our maid, was in the kitchen finishing cleaning the stove. "Good evening, Mrs. Clare," she said, without looking me in the eyes. There was something different about her lately. A redder lipstick, a sweeter perfume, an almost defiant posture. I shook my head, pushing those thoughts away. I was getting paranoid, seeing ghosts where there were none. I went up to my bedroom, took off my shoes, and walked to the window. The light was on at the house next door. Through the sheer curtain, I saw the silhouette of the blonde woman moving around. She seemed to be unpacking books. Suddenly she stopped and looked toward my window, as if she sensed she was being watched. I stepped back quickly, my heart racing. Why was I so nervous? She was just a new neighbor, but something told me that woman would bring irrevocable changes to my monotonous and cold life. The rain in Seattle has the power to wash the soul or freeze the bones, and on that Tuesday, it seemed determined to do the latter. I had just arrived from the flower shop, my arms full of grocery bags that Richard had demanded for dinner, when the electronic garage gate decided to jam. It was an old problem, one of those things my husband had promised to fix 6 months ago. But that always got pushed back, as if my safety and comfort were not priorities on his busy schedule. I dropped the bags on the wet pavement of the sidewalk and tried to pull the heavy iron gate with both hands, but it did not move a single inch. I felt the freezing water soak my thin blouse and mix with the tears of frustration that began to well up in my eyes. I felt pathetic, a weak girl fighting a machine, exposed on the deserted street while cars sped by, splashing more water onto the sidewalk. It was in that moment of silent humiliation that I heard the deep rumble of an approaching engine. It was not a luxury sedan like the ones that usually drove around our neighborhood, but a black, tall, rugged Jeep, which drove up the curb of the house next door with irritating ease. The driver's door opened, and even before seeing her face, I saw the boots. They were black, heavy combat boots, stepping firmly into the puddle without the slightest hesitation. My eyes traveled up her dark jeans until they met the black leather jacket shining under the drizzle. It was her, the mysterious neighbor. She did not run from the rain like I would. She walked toward me with long, calm strides, as if the storm were just an irrelevant detail in her day. "This type of motor always jams when the humidity rises," she said, her rough, deep voice cutting through the sound of the rain. It was not a question. It was a technical statement. I stood paralyzed, holding the cold gate, feeling tiny next to her height. She must have been almost 5'11". Without asking for permission, she stood beside me. I felt the heat radiating from her body, an absurd contrast to the cold surrounding me. "Let me try," she murmured, and with a single, firm movement of her shoulders, she pulled the gate. The iron groaned and gave way, sliding along the track as if it weighed nothing. I let out the breath I did not even know I was holding. She wiped her hands on her jeans, a gesture both rough and charming at the same time, and finally turned to face me head-on. Up close, she looked even older than me, maybe around 40 years old, with fine lines around her eyes suggesting she had seen a lot in life. Her scent hit me completely. It was not a sweet perfume. It was the smell of rain, leather, and something citrusy, clean, and strong. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "My husband, he said he was going to call the technician last week." She arched a blonde eyebrow, and there was a gleam of disdain in her eyes, not for me, but for the mention of my useless husband. It was then that the wind blew harder, slightly opening her leather jacket. The movement revealed, clipped to her belt, a silver badge and the matte black grip of a handgun. I took a step back instinctively, my heart racing in my chest. A gun, in my world, meant danger, robbery, fear. She noticed my fright immediately. With a smooth movement, she closed her jacket and offered a half smile that completely transformed her face, softening the harshness of her features. "Easy, neighbor. I am a detective with the Seattle Police Department. I am the good guy in the story, or at least I try to be," she said, in a playful tone that made me let out a nervous laugh. "I just moved into the townhouse next door. I am Jane." She reached out her right hand to me. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before extending mine. Her hand swallowed mine. Her palm was rough, calloused, warm, and firm. It was not a quick social greeting like the ones I was used to at Richard's business dinners, where people barely touched. Jane held my hand for real, in a grip that seemed to say, "I am here, I see you." "I am Claire," I replied, feeling a warmth travel up my arm and spread through my chest, chasing away the cold of the rain. We stood there, holding hands under the fine Seattle rain, for a time that lasted 2 or 3 seconds longer than necessary. I looked into her eyes and saw a brown depth that made me dizzy. For the first time in years, I did not feel like a decorative object. I felt protected. It was a strange and dangerous feeling for a married woman to have in front of an armed stranger on the sidewalk. "Nice to meet you, Claire." She said my name, testing the syllables, and it sounded different in her voice, more full-bodied. She let go of my hand slowly, and I missed the contact immediately. "You better go inside. This chill is not good for anyone who does not have thick skin like mine. If the gate jams again, or if you need anything else, just yell over the fence, okay?" "Thank you, Jane," I said, hugging the grocery bags against my chest like a shield. She winked at me, turned her back, and walked back to her Jeep, with that confident stride of someone who owns her own destiny. I got into my car and finished parking, but my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. It was not from the cold. It was adrenaline. I walked into my silent, perfect house, but the feeling of her warm, rough hand still tingled on my skin, like a silent promise that perhaps I was no longer so alone in the world. I could still feel the warmth of Jane's hand on my skin when I entered the house. But the feeling did not last long. As soon as I closed the heavy solid wood door, the freezing atmosphere of my own life swallowed me again. That night dragged on, with Richard coming home late and going straight to the shower, without even asking how my day was. I lay beside him, listening to his heavy breathing, and felt like the loneliest person in the world. But the worst part was not the silence of that night. It was the subtle noise that began the next morning. A noise I refused to hear, but that screamed in my ears. I woke up to the sound of muffled laughter coming from downstairs. It was 6 a.m. Richard never laughed at that hour. He was usually a man of few words and a very bad morning mood. I tiptoed down the stairs, driven by a curiosity that made my stomach churn. When I reached the kitchen door, I stopped. Richard was sitting at the table, finishing his coffee, and Sarah was standing next to him, pouring another cup. She said something quietly, leaning in a little closer than necessary, and he smiled. Not that social smile he gave at dinners, but a relaxed, almost complicit smile. "Good morning," I said, entering the room and making sure my heels clicked loudly on the floor. Richard's smile vanished instantly, replaced by his usual mask of indifference. Sarah stepped away from him in a quick movement, returning to the sink with a stiff posture. "Good morning, Claire," he replied, without looking at me, turning his attention back to his tablet. "You are late today. Sarah had to get my coffee ready early. I came down at the usual time." I defended myself, feeling my face heat up. The alarm has not even gone off yet. I sat at the table, feeling like an intruder in my own kitchen. Sarah's perfume, a sweet and sickening scent of cheap vanilla, seemed to permeate the air, mixing with the smell of coffee and Richard's aftershave. I tried to bring up the garden renovation, but Richard cut me off with an impatient wave of his hand. "Please, Claire, do not start with frivolities right now. My head is full of company problems." I swallowed hard and took a bite of my toast, which suddenly tasted like sawdust. It was then that the shirt incident happened. Richard stood up and noticed a button was missing on the cuff of his navy blue dress shirt. He huffed, annoyed, and looked at me as if I had committed a capital crime. "I asked you to check this shirt last week, Claire. This is unbelievable. I have an important meeting and now I am going to look sloppy." I did not see it, I am sorry. I can sew it right now, it is quick," I offered, already standing up, nervous. "Never mind, Mrs. Claire," Sarah intervened, her voice too soft, almost mocking. "I already left the other gray shirt ironed and ready in the walk-in closet, just in case Mr. Richard needed it. I figured this button was going to fall off. It was loose anyway." Richard looked at her and then at me, and what he said next was like a cold stab to my stomach. "Do you see that, Claire? This is efficiency. Sarah anticipates problems while you live with your head in the clouds with your flowers. Why don't you learn a little from her about how to take care of a house?" I froze, feeling tears burn my eyes. He was comparing me to the maid, right in front of her. And the worst part, Sarah did not look embarrassed. On the contrary, I saw a gleam of triumph in her eyes as she adjusted his collar, an intimate gesture that should have been mine. I felt tiny, incompetent, a broken doll that was no good even for decorating or serving. Richard left for work without giving me a goodbye kiss, just a dry wave. Sarah stayed in the kitchen, humming a low song while she washed the dishes. I went up to the bedroom, locked the door, and leaned against the cold wood, trying to control my breathing. My mind tried to find logical justifications. He is stressed, I thought. Sarah is paid to be efficient, I am not. But my female intuition, that ancestral voice that lives deep in our gut, screamed that something was very wrong. I spent the morning wandering through the house like a ghost. I went to his home office to clean, something I like to do to feel useful. As I fluffed the pillows on the leather sofa, I smelled that scent again. Vanilla. The same sweet perfume Sarah wore. But why would she be sitting on the sofa in his office? Doubt began to corrode my sanity. Was I going crazy? Was the isolation making me imagine things? I needed to get out of there. The house, which before was only cold, now seemed hostile, full of secrets whispered by the walls. I grabbed my purse and went to the flower shop, seeking refuge among the plants that did not lie and did not betray. But even there, surrounded by the beauty of the orchids, the image of Richard smiling at Sarah would not leave my head. His comparison echoed, "Why aren't you like her?" I returned home in the late afternoon, emotionally exhausted. As I parked the car, I looked at the townhouse next door. The light on Jane's porch was on, a warm yellow dot in the darkness of the street. I remembered what she had said. "If you need anything, just yell." I did not need sugar or help with the gate. I needed someone to tell me I was not crazy. I needed a refuge, because my own home had turned into a minefield where I walked on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. I crossed the yard separating our houses with my heart beating in my throat, as if I were committing a crime. In my hands, I carried a pan of still warm pound cake, the perfect domestic excuse my mind invented to justify the visit. I rang the doorbell of the exposed brick townhouse and waited, nervously smoothing my dress. It did not take 5 seconds for the door to open. Jane was there, but different from the woman in leather armor I had seen on the street. She wore gray sweatpants and a simple white tank top, which showed off her toned arms and a discreet tattoo on her shoulder, something that looked like a compass or a rose of the winds. "Claire, is everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed in genuine concern. The gun was not on her waist, but her alert posture was the same. "No, I just baked a cake and thought, since you are moving in, maybe you have not had time to go to the grocery store," I stammered, holding out the pan like a shield. Her face lit up in a wide smile, revealing dimples I had not noticed before. "You are the best neighbor I have ever had. Come in, please. That smells incredible." Walking into Jane's house was like receiving a hug. While my house was cold, white, and smelled of chemical cleaning products, her living room was a nest of comfort. The floor was dark wood, covered in plush rugs. There were floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a brown leather armchair that seemed to embrace whoever sat in it, and in the air hung an intoxicating scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with sandalwood. It was the smell of a lived-in home, of real life. "Take a seat. Do not mind the mess with the boxes. I will get some plates," she said, pointing to the couch. I sat down, feeling my body relax for the first time in days. I observed the details while she went to the kitchen. There were photos in frames above the unlit fireplace, Jane in uniform at a graduation, Jane hugging a large dog, Jane on a mountain trail. She seemed to have such a full, vibrant life. I felt like a blank sheet of paper next to her. She returned carrying 2 steaming mugs and colorful little plates, nothing like the fragile white porcelain dishes Richard demanded we use. "Black coffee, strong, no sugar." "I hope you like it," she said, handing me the mug. Our fingers brushed when I took the hot ceramic. I felt that electric shock again, a current that ran up my arm and warmed my face. "Thank you. It is perfect," I murmured, taking a sip. The coffee was strong, full-bodied, and went down burning in a good way, waking up my senses. "So, neighbor, tell me, did the gate jam again, or did you just need to escape that ice palace for a bit?" she asked, sitting in the armchair across from me, crossing her legs in a casual way. The question was direct, but the tone was not gossipy. It was from someone who saw right through walls. I looked down at my cake, feeling a lump in my throat. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, my voice thick. "I am a detective, Claire. I spend my life reading people, and you have that look of someone who is screaming on the inside but smiling on the outside," she said softly. "This Richard guy, does he treat you well?" The question hung in the air. I could have lied. I could have said he was wonderful, that we were happy. But there, in that warm living room, under the attentive gaze of those brown eyes, I could not keep up the charade. "He gives me everything money can buy," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "But sometimes I feel like I am just another expensive object on his shelf. And lately, there is Sarah, the maid. I think I am going crazy, Jane. I see looks, smiles." Jane did not interrupt me. She did not say it was all in my head. She did not tell me to be grateful for a rich husband. She simply leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, entirely focused on me. "A woman's intuition rarely fails, Claire. And a wife's, never," she said, with an earnestness that gave me chills. "If you feel something is wrong, it probably is. But do not let that diminish you. You seem to be an amazing, sweet, talented woman. That cake did not bake itself." Does he not know how lucky he is? I felt my cheeks burn at the compliment. It had been years since anyone praised me for something I did, only for my looks. Thank you, Jane. You barely know me, and you have already been kinder to me than he has been in months. I know good people when I see them, and I know broken people too, because I used to be one. She smiled, a sad smile this time. Look, in this house, you will always have hot coffee and someone to listen to you. No judgment. Consider this your forward outpost of peace. We finished the coffee talking about trivial things. She told me about the stress at the precinct, about how she liked to refurbish antique furniture in her spare time. I talked about my passion for flowers, about how every species had a meaning. For a whole hour, I forgot I was Mrs. Richard. I was just Claire. We laughed at a silly joke about the Seattle weather, and the sound of my own laugh sounded strange to me, like a song I had not heard in a long time. When I looked at the clock on the wall, I got a scare. It was already past 5 in the afternoon. Richard would be home soon. The magic broke. I need to go, I said, jumping up, the anxiety squeezing my chest again. Jane stood up too, and walked me to the door. Before I left, she placed her hand on my shoulder. A heavy, warm hand. Hey, remember what I said? If the weather gets rough over there, my gate is always unlocked for you. I ran back home, feeling the cold air of the street hit me violently. I walked into my aseptic kitchen and the contrast was brutal. The silence of my house seemed to scream in my ears. But now, something had changed. I had tasted what life could be like. Warm, welcoming, and smelling like coffee. And for the first time, the idea of continuing to live in that ice felt unbearable. I did not know it, but that cup of coffee had been the start of my revolution. Hope is a dangerous thing. Even after everything, even with my intuition screaming and Jane's warning echoing in my mind, a naive part of me still wanted to save my marriage. That Thursday, I left the flower shop early. I had spent the afternoon putting together a special arrangement, a dramatic composition of white lilies and dark foliage, the kind of thing Richard would say was elegant enough for the living room. I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to arrive before him, draw a bath, try to be the perfect wife he demanded so much. I felt guilty for having coffee with the neighbor and speaking ill of him. Maybe I am the problem, I thought, driving back home under the cloudy sky. I parked the car on the street, so I would not make noise with the garage gate, and went through the front door with my spare key. The house was plunged into absolute silence, but it was not the usual empty silence. It was a heavy, loaded silence, like the air right before a thunderclap. I looked at the wall clock. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. Sarah should have been in the laundry room and Richard in his office across town. But, walking past the console table in the foyer, I saw his set of keys thrown there, right next to Sarah's cheap faux leather purse. My heart stopped for a second, and then resumed beating in a frantic, painful rhythm, hitting against my ribs like a trapped bird. He must have come home for lunch and forgot something. I tried to rationalize, but my feet felt like lead as I walked toward the stairs. With every step I climbed on the cold marble, the silence of the house seemed to diminish, giving way to muffled sounds. They were not shouts. They were not conversations. They were low laughs, whispers. The second-floor hallway felt like it was miles long. I walked holding the vase of lilies so tightly I could feel my fingertips turn white. The door to our bedroom, the master suite I had decorated with so much care, was slightly open. A crack of just a few inches, enough to destroy an entire life. I stood there, paralyzed by the terror of confirming what I already knew. Sarah's sweet and sickening scent was not in the kitchen. It was there, coming out of my bedroom, mixed with Richard's woody cologne. I stepped closer, and I saw it. It was not like in the movies where the wife screams and makes a scene. reality is much more cruel and silent. I saw their silhouettes on my bed, the disgusting intimacy, the whispers, the way she laughed at something he said, throwing her head back onto the pillows I had picked out. The world spun. My vision blurred at the edges. I felt a sharp physical pain in the center of my chest, as if someone had reached in and ripped my heart out in cold blood. The comparison he made at breakfast echoed in my head with brutal clarity. He did not want a wife. He wanted that dirty betrayal in the middle of the afternoon. I took a step back, the floor seeming to slip from beneath my feet. The vase slipped from my sweaty hands, but I clutched it against my chest in a reflex, crushing the perfect flowers, staining my blouse. I could not breathe. They did not see me. They were too busy destroying what was left of my life. I spun on my heels, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I needed to get out of that place, which suddenly felt like the setting of a nightmare. I ran down the stairs, the tears finally overflowing, hot and silent. The rain fell with a violence that felt personal, mixing with the hot tears running down my face and smudging my flawless makeup. I crossed the lawn separating our houses without caring about the mud ruining my designer shoes or the freezing water soaking my silk blouse. The biting Seattle cold penetrated my bones, but it was the cold in my soul, caused by the repulsive image I had just seen, that made me shiver uncontrollably. I felt dirty, humiliated, exposed. With every step, Sarah's laugh and Richard's moan echoed in my mind like a scratched record, a sonic torture I could not turn off. I reached the solid wood door of Jane's house and pounded the surface with the side of my closed fist, with no rhythm, no manners, just sheer desperation. I looked back at my own house with the front door wide open, with an irrational fear of seeing Richard stepping out, shouting, demanding I come back to keep up appearances. But the street was deserted, gray and silent, a mute witness to my breakdown. Where was my perfect life? Where was the dignity I pretended to have? Everything had been washed away by the rain and the betrayal. It did not take 10 seconds for the door to open. Jane appeared, holding a steaming mug of coffee, dressed in black sweatpants and a worn-out gray t-shirt. The welcoming smile she started to form died instantly when her eyes landed on me. I must have been a terrifying sight. A drenched, shaking woman, with mascara running down her cheeks and eyes wide with panic. Claire? She breathed my name, dropping the mug on an entryway table with a dull thud. My God, what happened? You are freezing. She did not wait for an answer. With a quick, decisive movement, she pulled me inside by the arm and kicked the door shut, locking the deadbolt with a metallic click that sounded, to me, like the lock of a safe. The outside world, the world of Richard, of Sarah, of the lies, was left behind. The thermal contrast was brutal. The air in Jane's house was heated, smelling of wood and comfort. But I could not stop shivering. My teeth chattered against each other with an irritating noise. I tried to speak, tried to explain that I was not crazy, that I had seen it, that my marriage was a sham. But the words got stuck in my throat, choked by the convulsive crying I was trying to hold back. I hugged my own body, trying to keep myself together, feeling that if I let go of my arms, I would fall to pieces on her living room floor. Hey, breathe. Look at me, Jane ordered, her voice firm but sweet, holding my shoulders with large, warm hands. You are safe here. Nobody comes in here without my invitation. She guided me to the brown leather sofa and made me sit down. I sank into the cushions, pulling my legs up, getting her upholstery dirty with the rainwater. But she did not seem to mind at all. I am going to get a towel and something dry. Do not move from there, she said, and vanished down the hallway at an impressive speed. I was left alone for a minute, staring at the gas fireplace lit in the corner of the room. The flames danced hypnotically. I wondered if Richard had realized I was gone. Did he stop? Did he get dressed and come after me? Or did he just continue, indifferent to my existence, laughing with his mistress in the bed I chose? The pain of that doubt was worse than any physical wound. I felt like the stupidest woman in the world for having bought flowers for a man who despised me. Jane returned carrying a huge fluffy towel and a plaid wool blanket. She did not throw the things at me. She kneeled in front of me, getting to eye level, and began to dry my hair with a gentleness I did not expect from someone who carried a gun. "Give me your hands," she asked. I held out my freezing, shaking hands. She wrapped them in the towel and rubbed vigorously, trying to bring the blood back to my fingers. The friction generated heat, and that heat began to melt the ice wrapped around my heart. I managed to whisper, my voice hoarse and broken. "I came home early. I saw them both." Jane stopped the movement of her hands for a second. Her face, which was focused on the task of drying me, hardened. Her jaw clenched, and I saw that detective look, cold and analytical, cross her eyes. It was not anger at me. It was a protective fury. "Richard?" she asked, low and dangerous. "Him and Sarah. In my bed," I sobbed, and the confession made the dam burst. The crying came full force, a howl of pain I had been holding in for years. Jane did not say, "I told you so." She did not say, "I am sorry." She dropped the towel, sat beside me on the sofa, and did the only thing I desperately needed. She pulled me into her arms. I buried my face in her neck, smelling clean skin and neutral soap, and broke down. I cried for the humiliation, for the 3 lost years, for my naivety. She held me tightly, one hand on my back and the other stroking my damp hair, rocking me slightly as if I were a wounded child. Her body was solid, strong, a pillar I could lean on without fear of falling. "Shh. It is over, Claire. It is over," she whispered against my ear, her voice vibrating in my chest. "Let it all out. Cry everything you have to cry right now. Because tomorrow we fix this." In that embrace, I felt something I had never felt with Richard. I was not an object. I was not a trophy. I was a person who mattered. The heat from Jane's body passed through the blanket and my wet clothes, and for the first time that horrible afternoon, the shivering started to fade. I did not know what would happen next. I did not know where I was going to live, or how I was going to survive. But right there, with my head resting on my neighbor's shoulder, I had absolute certainty. I would never go back to that cold house on the other side of the wall. I cannot tell how long we stayed there, holding each other on the brown leather sofa, while the rain lashed against the living room window. Time seemed to have lost its meaning. The only real thing was the sound of Jane's rhythmic breathing and the solid warmth of her body against mine, passing through the thick fabric of the blanket and reaching my bones. I cried until I had no more tears, releasing 3 years of loneliness, of unspoken words, and of a fake perfection that had just shattered. And throughout all that time, Jane did not let go of me. She did not complain. She did not shift uncomfortably. She did not look at the clock. She stayed right there, steady as a rock in the middle of my private storm. When the crying finally stopped, all that remained was an exhausted and comfortable silence. I pulled my face away from her neck, feeling embarrassed by the damp stain my tears had left on her gray t-shirt. "I am sorry. I got your shirt all wet," I murmured, trying to pull away, but her arm remained firm around my shoulders, keeping me close. "T-shirts dry, Claire. Hearts take a little longer, but they mend too," she said, her deep voice vibrating in her chest, resonating in my back. She pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. Her face was serious, but not with that police hardness from before. There was a tenderness in her brown gaze that completely disarmed me. She raised her hand, and with her rough thumb, wiped away a smudge of mascara on my cheek. The touch was so soft, so full of care, that I felt a shiver run down the back of my neck, very different from the cold I felt earlier. Do you want to tell me the details? Or would you rather I just imagine how cruel that jerk was? She asked quietly. I took a deep breath, smelling the sandalwood and clean skin that radiated from her, and decided to speak. I needed to let it out. He compared me to her this morning, I confessed, my voice weak. He said I was not efficient, that I lived with my head in the clouds. And when I got there, she did not look like a maid. She looked like the lady of the house. They were laughing, Jane. Laughing in my bed. As if I did not even exist. As if I was a joke. I felt the muscles of Jane's arm tense around me. Her jaw clenched, and I saw a spark of genuine anger cross her eyes. He is a fool, she said, with a conviction that startled me. A man who has a woman like you at home and looks for efficiency in another bed is not just a traitor, he is an idiot. You are not an object to be efficient, Claire. You have light. I saw it the moment you tried to open that gate in the rain. Those words landed in my chest like a balm. No one had ever told me I had light. Richard used to say I had good taste, or good looks. But light? I blushed violently and looked down at her hands, which now held mine in my lap. Her hands were large with short, unpolished nails, hands of someone who did things, of someone who protected. Compared to Richard's soft, manicured hands, Jane's seemed real. I have nowhere to go, I whispered, practical reality setting in. My family is out in the country. I do not want to worry my parents right now. And I have no money of my own, Jane. The salary from the flower shop barely pays for lunch. He controlled everything. Jane squeezed my hands firmly, forcing me to look at her again. Hey, stop that. You are not out on the street. You are here. The couch turns into a bed. There is food in the fridge, and the shower is hot. You stay as long as you need, a day, a week, a month, until you get back on your feet. Her generosity made my eyes burn again, but this time, it was not from sadness. It was gratitude. And something else, being there, so close to her, feeling the heat of her body, the safety of her voice, began to awaken sensations I thought were dead. I looked at Jane's mouth as she spoke. Perfectly shaped lips, neither thin nor thick, moving with a mesmerizing firmness. Suddenly, the room felt too small, or too warm. Why are you doing this for me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We barely know each other. Jane held my gaze, and the silence that settled between us changed texture. It stopped being the silence of comfort and became something charged, electric. She tilted her head slightly to the side, studying my face as if it were a map. Sometimes you do not need years to know someone, Claire. Sometimes a look in the rain is enough. I saw you, truly, and I do not usually leave the people I see unprotected. The air between us grew heavy, dense. My heart, which before beat with panic, now raced for another reason. I was vulnerable, yes, but I was also alive. For the first time in years, I felt my blood run hot in my veins. Her proximity was intoxicating. I could see her golden eyelashes, a small scar near her left eyebrow, the pulse in her neck. I should pull away. I was a married woman, technically, who had just discovered a betrayal. But my body did not want to pull away. It wanted to nest. I wanted to know what that mouth tasted like, the one speaking words so strong and kind. I leaned in, just a few millimeters, an almost imperceptible movement, but Jane noticed. Her eyes darkened, her pupils dilating. She did not back away. You are safe here, she repeated, in a husky whisper. but this time it sounded less like a promise of police protection and more like a promise of something much more intimate. My breath hitched. The pain of the betrayal was still there, but it was quickly being covered by an overwhelming wave of desire and need. I no longer wanted to be the victim of the story. I wanted, if only for one night, to be the chosen woman. And in Jane's eyes, I saw that I was the only thing that mattered in that room. There was no awkwardness when the distance between me and Jane closed in the living room lit only by the fireplace. There was only a startling naturalness, as if our souls already knew each other from past lives and were just reuniting, as if it were a true sanctuary. The outside world could be falling apart, but my world now came down to the touch of the hands of that woman who decided to save me. As the night progressed and the rain continued to fall over Seattle, we lost and found ourselves in each other. Every kiss was a promise of healing. Every caress was a brick in building my new self-esteem. And the silence of the early hours settled in. I did not fall asleep in fear or loneliness. I fell asleep wrapped in her strong arms, listening to the calm beats of a heart that now beat for me. The darkness was no longer terrifying. It was just the veil protecting our new beginning. If your heart is in your throat, and you want to know how this night will change Claire's destiny forever, do not worry. The continuation of this story of overcoming and true love is coming soon. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the ending.